What's up, guys? In this video, I'm going to show you how to build this page with Next.js. We're going to hook up the form submission. We're going to build our API routes and everything. This is going to be a really fun video. So if you ever want to learn Next.js and kind of get your hands dirty, then this is the video for you. Anyway, let's get ourselves right in, right? So first thing first, if you haven't learned Next.js before, head out to Next.js documentation. You will be able to quickly get started, but I already have a very simple Next.js project from the early video. So if I run this project, I do yon dev. You can run npm run dev, whichever one that you feel more comfortable to. So what that means is you can come here and do npm run dev. So that will be the same thing as yon dev, but in this case, I'm gonna go back and run yon dev in my case. So and then whenever that runs, you'll see what I have so far. I'm literally starting from scratch. I don't even have anything, just starting basically from scratch. Even the homepage possibly be empty. So let's take a look at the homepage here. Yes, we don't have anything inside our homepage. I'm just gonna come here and possibly just add an H1 right there. And I'm gonna say hello world. Let's put this one right there. And I'm gonna clean up a couple things. And I'll delete this one and we'll delete this prop. There you go, super basic. We'll delete this one too. And now our server is still up. And if we refresh this, we got our hello world, right? But how do we go about building this? Well, the good news is there is this website out there called chakratemplate.com. And if you guys haven't used Chakra UI, I highly recommend you use. They kind of have different Chakra UI. It's more like a library, UI library for, you just type Chakra UI. It's more like a UI library for React application. It's one of the best one out there. That's what I use for most of my project. So I highly recommend you do use it. But they also have a templates, and that template here have about 72 templates that you can use, from login, sign in, login, everything here. So if we go down there, we click page section. These are everything they have. They got a landing page. These are different landing pages, a nav bar. They have different nav bar as well. They got different authentication. So this is the one that we're going to use right there. But before you can use the Chakra templates, you need to go back to Chakra UI. So we're going to integrate Chakra UI with our React Next.js project. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to click get started. And then whenever I go down there, I'm going to select my project, which is Next.js. And then I'm going to copy this. This is in case you're using Yarn, or this is in case you're using, Yarn. This is in case you're using npm. So I'm going to copy this one. And I'm gonna copy the Yarn version. Which one is, it doesn't really matter which one, but it's the preference which one you use. So I'm gonna open a new terminal, and then I'm gonna go here. I paste whatever I copy from there. So this gonna go ahead and kinda configure everything for me. Now, in order for you to integrate Chakra UI, you need to navigate wherever you have the _.app. It's usually located under pages and then under _app. This is where you come in and kind of integrate most of the UI library that you're going to integrate. That could be Bootstrap, it could be Semantic UI, it could be Shopify Polaris, it could be anything, right? But this is where you come in to do that. So in our case, once our Chakra library is installed, we're gonna come here and bring a couple packages, actually one packages. So we're gonna come here and bring something called Chakra Provider. So we're gonna bring this one Chakra, so if I can spell that, Chakra React, and then we're gonna pick something called Chakra Provider from the Chakra UI itself. So there you go. So once I get that Chakra Provider, now I can come here and say, okay, this is going to be inside that Chakra Provider. So I'm take this component and now I wrap it around the Chakra Provider. And that's how this one looks like. And voila, that's it. That's pretty much everything that you need to do in order to integrate Chakra. If you want to go further, I'm gonna actually delete this global CSS. I don't know what that is, but if you want to go Chakra with UI, such as having a theme, gonna have different colors, that could be something else that we do. But with the goal of this video, we're gonna focus more on the pages. But in case you want to configure Chakra more, they have something called extends theme that you can use here. You can kind of pass it the different colors that you want to pass here. So you can kind of build like an entire object. From there, you kind of pass it the brand, and then you can have a different color here that you can kind of define for your brands. Okay, for example, you can have something that looks like this. You could say, okay, for 900, you could have this. For this one, you can have that. 800, so we'll do 800, yada yada, 700. These are just in case you want to have what they call theming, okay, for your application, especially if you're building a will web app. And then once you kind of set out your brand color, all you have to do is you bring technically the theme here. You bring this theme, and now you extend that. Okay. Now, once you extend that theme with the colors that were specified from there, you can come here and within the Chakra provider, then you pass it a variable called theme, and then you pass it that theme object. And that's how easy it is in case you want to do theming with Chakra, right? But this is beyond of this video. This is quickly kind of overview of Chakra. But how do we start building this, right? So we're going to come here and go to the Chakra templates. Once you navigate to whichever components you have, they give you the code. So you can come here and you can literally just copy. And in this case, I'm going to create a folder here called team, and I'm going to paste that one in there, right? So whenever you paste something like this, if I open my server, you might see a couple of things that break. That's okay. So if I navigate now to /team and open that, yes, there's a lot of things that are broken, right? So some of those components are built in TypeScript. Some of them aren't. It's kind of like a mix of everything. But we're going to try to fix this one. The first error we get, it's on line 201. So this is the error. It seems like this is TypeScript related. So I'm going to come here and delete this one. So that's the first error that we get rid of. Let's take a look at it again. The second error. So let's refresh this one and see the second error. Seems like I added some sort of J. That's my fault by typing too fast. And this is all the way at the end. So I'm going to remove that letter right there. And let's see. Voila, that's it. Copy and paste. I was able to integrate it, right? But what do we have? Let's review everything that they give you from this component. So in this case, we have what they call very imports. They are importing a lot of things from the Chakra UI. So they're importing box, they're importing flex, they're importing stack, heading, yada, yada, a lot of different things that they're importing, right? And then here they have a list of different avatars. And these avatars, I'm assuming it is referring to all these people. And again, if you haven't followed them, make sure you do. This guy, he's the founder of the Chakra library itself, Ken, and there's a lot of other people that are very contributing to this. And of course, this is you. This is me right there, but this is you here, right? So these are the avatar, and you can change it to whatever you want to do. And then after that, you got this component here that is the join team. So that's kind of like the main component. And then you have something here called blur, right? The blur, I'm assuming it's this top left corner thing here. So what I can do in this case, I can search where this blur is located, which this blur is located down there. So I can possibly remove it just for you guys to show. And if I remove it, you can see this is what this blur is referring to. So I'm going to put it back, put that blur back. It's going to look cool, honestly. And there you go. You got that blur thing looking good, right? And then after that, this is kind of like the main component, the blur thing. You already have an idea what it is. It's just an icon. It's just an icon that have different circle that they kind of fill it in. And then they got different width, and this is how they use breakpoints. In case you want to use breakpoint with Chakra UI, so you just use a hook called use breakpoints, and then from there they kind of pass it different value. So this is kind of like the base. On medium size they want to show this, on large size they're gonna show that one, and then from there you can kind of like minimize the screen, and it will be going in pretty well with the UI. So this is in case you want to use responsive design. So technically this looked good. This looked really good. And then from there you got a container. The container, that's the one that contains everything. But if you remember, we're gonna need to work with all of this in order to be able to submit that. So first thing I'm gonna do, I'm gonna try to get those input value. For example, whenever the user enter a name, or like they enter an email, whatever that is. For example, if they enter an email, I want to be able to get those value and then whatever, and then be able to submit my form to Next.js. So in this case, what I'm going to do here is this. I'm going to come here and let's do this. So I'm going to come here. This is the component. This is kind of like the main one. So I'm going to come here and say, okay, I'm going to create a couple states. Now I'm going to bring React. I'm going to use something from React called React States. Okay, so I'm going to use states. That's what I'm going to use. I'm going to use states. I'm going to bring that one. And then from there, I'm going to use my states. So I'm going to set up different things. I'm going to get the email. So I'll set email, and then I'm going to use states that I got. So this one is referring to that use state from React. And then after that, I'm going to do couple one just for these other values, such as name. So we'll get the name, and then we'll set the name as well. And then with this one will be phone number, and then this one will be set phone number. Now I'll leave the file one for maybe part 2 for this one, because I don't want this to be complicated. And then whenever we get those values, we're gonna log them. For now, I could say okay, name, just for us to see what we're working with. And then we're gonna go here and set up name. We'll do name. Oops, I can type that out. Come on, name, and then I'll go here, gonna set up that name. And then we'll set up the same thing for phone. And then we'll do phone like this, right? And I will move that one. And then the console one, for now, I'm just gonna set up a very simple console. So I'll do console, and then I'm gonna come here and destructure this one. And the reason I did that is I'm gonna be using a lot of them just to show you guys. And now I can come here and remove all that console, and it looks like this. So nothing should happen, because right now, if we take a look at them, if I go back to my console, they're all empty, right? They're all undefined because there's no value inside of them yet. And I want to show you guys exactly everything that we're doing down the scene so that you can see what's happening behind the scene, right? So what I'm going to do, I'm going to set up some default value to them. So maybe they already have some placeholder. So I can possibly set up something like ecom, whatever that is. And now you can see they haven't set yet, but now in the console, you can see those values all being there, which is cool. So I'm going to copy those values, like name, and I'm going to look for wherever we have this form. In this case, I'm going to search for where we have first name. So if I search for it, this is the input that do have search name. This is the second one, and this is the third one, right? And this one, yada yada, you can kind of have an idea. And I believe down this line, you can kind of see the submit button. And if you can kind of go further, you'll see possibly, yes, this is the button here that kind of like upload CV. All right, so in this case, I'm going to get the first name. So I'm going to come within first name, add a value here, and I'm going to set this one to the email, actually to the first name value. And now whenever that we refresh the page, whatever the default value that we set, first name is not defined. I'll possibly name it something else. Actually don't have I call it name. Hold on. Yeah, I'll use the name instead. So I'm going to come here and set the name. And now you can see whenever it loads with name. I can change it to be like, I can say something like name, or enter full name, whatever that is. And you can see that changes, right? So if I refresh this one, I changed the wrong thing. So I should be changing name instead. I'm going to leave this one as empty. And I'm gonna enter full name, something like this. And if I do that, you can see now this enter. Now, why am I showing you this, right? Well, the reason I'm showing you this is because you can set up value that you want to be setting as default from your use states, right? So I'm gonna go ahead and leave this as empty because I want to use the placeholder value instead. So whatever that placeholder value was, and the placeholder value, this is here. Like this is what is telling the user what they should input. If you add the value itself, is going to be the actual value that is going to go to the server. Anyway, we're gonna need to set the state. So we're gonna come here and say every time that the user change something, which is the on change, then we're gonna come here and set up and update the name. Okay, so we're gonna update the name. And the way we're gonna update the name, we're gonna get the target value from here. And once we get the target value, then we're gonna set the value from there. I'm gonna safeguard this just in case we don't get the target name. It doesn't crash the app. So this will be like more like a safeguard if you wanna put it that way. So I'm gonna save this and voila. So if we change the name now, if I go here and say it, you can see now the name is changing within the console. and it is changing as expected, right? So if I go here, hello world, you can see now that the name is changing as expected. Well, the reason I brought up the value part, which was you can set up like a default value within the name and kind of do that. Whenever you're working with React, if you do not have that value, you're working with something called control form and uncontrolled form, yada yada. That's a whole nother topic, but check this out. The fact that I didn't put the value, now if I come here, this is still updating, but sometimes whenever you're working with control form, you might run with an issue where it is not updating. So this one is updating for me with no issue, but I'll put the value back. That's always good practice. So hey, we built out the set name. We're gonna go back and do the same thing for the order input form. So we're gonna come here. This one is the email. So I'm gonna change this one to email. And then this time I'm gonna change this one to set email, something like this. And then the same thing for phone number. I'm gonna come here and copy this. This one's gonna be phone number. And then this one's gonna be set phone number. So basically what we're using is we're using the set name, set phone number, and then set email, okay, that we get from the three of these guys that we set out, okay? So that's what we are doing right there. And every time any one of them updates, it will be updating accordingly. So now, if I come here and say, okay, I'm gonna put the first name, you can see it's updating. If I get the email, something like this, Gmail, and then third one, if I do like phone, whatever that is, I'm gonna put like the dummy phone, it is updating accordingly. So yeah, that is looking really good. But how do we send those over to our server? Like once the user enter the form, how do we process this? I'm gonna go ahead and delete this button right there. It's not actually a file, it's just like a button that you can really, let me put it back. I don't think you can really upload a file. So let's take a look. So if I click that, you see, it doesn't do crap. So I'm just gonna go back and delete this one. We're not gonna do anything with it, but if you were, there would be certain things, right? So how does this work? How would we go about adding something to it? So second thing, I want to remove that default value I have here, and now it is being set like this. So we know we're getting the value, but how do we submit that value? Well, the way we need to submit that, we're gonna build a function here. We're gonna call this one handle submit. Okay, it's gonna be responsible to handle the submit. Now this function, we're gonna call this function every time that the user click this button. Okay, so every time that they click this button, we're gonna call this function right there. So every time that the user click this button, we're gonna invoke this function. In this case, what we're gonna do is, in case it is a form, I'm gonna come here and prevent the default behavior from this. And then after that, I'm gonna build out an object. I could say team payload, something like that. And then the data I'm gonna build it with, all these three guys. So I'm gonna take the email, the phone number, and paste it in there. And now I'm gonna be building it like this. So that's the form I'm building. And now I can bring this one of the console log right there, and I'm gonna console log actually the payload, just to see whenever we click this button, what is happening. So here's what should happen. Every time we enter something, it's gonna change the data. But the moment that we hit submit, then we gonna go here and console log the actual data that we get. Actually, it's team payload. So there you go. So let's take a look. So now I'm gonna delete this out. I'm gonna go back again, enter a name. And if I enter whatever that is, I'm gonna call this one .gmail, whatever. And I'm gonna enter a form and then yada yada. So if I click submit, you can see now I'm getting that entire payload, which is really, really cool, right? But how do we submit this over the server? Well, the way that we're gonna submit this over the server is we're gonna come here and actually add a to-do. And I'm gonna say send data over the server. And on the server side, we're gonna build, actually, if you remember from my tutorial, you're gonna use this thing called API, okay? API is a way you can start building APIs on your Next.js application, and think about it more as if you were having a Node.js application, but you don't need Node.js because you got that built into Next.js, which is really cool. So now I can come in and say, I'm gonna call this one team add, like the ability for people, like a post request, right? And the way it started, there is a starting file called hello world, and this is how you start it up, right? So you just come here and say export default You give it a function name. I call this one typically handler. The name doesn't matter. You can give this whatever you want to call it, but in this case, I'm going to call it team add. And this is where you start building things out and send requests back to the server. So in this case, I'm going to accept the request. There's the request. I'm going to get the payload that are coming in. I'm going to say request payload, the payload that we're going to send. We're going to get it over the body. And again, always good to safeguard your code. Then I'm going to console log. I'm going to pretty much console log this. So I'm going to come here and say, okay, I'm going to do the same thing like I did on here. And then voila. So I'm going to log this one. I'm going to log the data that I'm getting back. And I'm going to say request payload. And I'm going to log the request payload right there. And I'm going to send a JSON back just for you guys to see what's happening. And I'm going to send the request payload and voila, right? So, but how do we test this, right? So how do we go here? We test this. Now, remember, before we test this, there's a couple of things I want you guys to remember. And the first thing is the API is what you use in order to build different like endpoints, right? For example, you can build post endpoint, get endpoint, request endpoint, yada, yada. So in this case, I'm gonna just send a simple message. I can say, hello world. And now let's make sure my server's up. Now check this out. If I go back to my server on the /API /team add, in this case, I'm gonna go here, localhost /API /team add. And if I click that one, I got a response back, which is team hello, which is team hello world, right? So that's the beauty of it. You can build different endpoints, but what we need is we don't need a get request. So we can add a check here to make sure that we get the actual request that we're looking for. So we're looking for post request. This shouldn't be a get request, right? So you can say, okay, if the user sent out a post request, we're gonna process this. If not, we can possibly just return this one. And then we're gonna say, okay, if not, we're gonna return back to the client with a response status for whatever 500. We can say, we can add some validation message. This needs to be a post request, something like that. Now, if we try this again to send this data, it's gonna give us an error and say this needs to be a post request. So that's how you can kind of build different endpoints with your API. But how do we connect them? We got our API, but how do we connect them? Well, if you remember from the application that we have, which was, if I remember here, team pages. Well, we have everything. We have the handler submit ready to go. We got our team payload ready to go. It's just a matter of where do we send the data, right? So you could use different things. You could use the packages. You could use the built-in fetch request. In this case, I'm gonna use the Axios. You know, it's way easier to work with. It's super simple. I'm gonna come here and install a new package. I'm gonna call this one Axios. So come here, I install Axios. It's gonna take a second for Axios to process. Whenever that comes in, I'm gonna come here and import Axios. And I'm gonna come here and say, okay, this is Axios. And whenever we get Axios, now we can process this to be okay, we're gonna try cache just in case there's an error. We're gonna say response data. Okay. Now we're gonna send those data using Axios. And once we send those data using Axios, we're gonna use this one. We're gonna give it the URL of where this data going to be. We're gonna make sure that it's a post request, and then we're gonna send out our data that we wanna send, which is in this case, and it's going to be team payload. Now that's it. If you have Axios like this, it will return you some sort of promises. We want to work with async await. So we'll come over this function and then we'll pass something like this. And then we'll say await. Now we can await for this one. I believe this one's going to return us the data, something like this. And now we can console log that data response back. So just to see what we get back. And in case there is any error, we can come here and say, okay, this one I'm gonna display the error. I could say, okay, let's display whatever the error that we're getting back. And voila, this is technically how we send data. But is that going to work? Let's give it a try. So if I go back to the application that we were using before, I'm gonna go back to just team. Let's go here to just team. I'm gonna try to send this to see you guys what's happening, right? So if I come here and say, okay, Sterling, Axime, whatever that is, Gmail. I'm gonna add a phone number, whatever that is, and then I'm gonna submit, right? I got an error. Number one, Axios is not a function. Okay, they said Axios is not a function. So there's an issue with Axios. Possibly Axios hasn't been installed yet. Yes, it has been installed. So there is an issue with Axios. We'll look into that. But let's take a look. If I take a look at the network requests, let's make sure I submit it again. Give me 1 second. I'm gonna submit it again one more time. We're getting some sort of payload here. So let's dive and see what's happening here. So what's happening is the request, if we take a look at the network request, there isn't a request that went out. So the reason being is because of this. I shouldn't be destructuring Axios. I should be importing Axios like this. Now they should work. Let's take a look. So if I possibly clear out these messages, click submit again. Now you can see over the network requests, hold on, let's try it one more time. So if I do that, there are some requests that are happening. If you take a look at here, there's some requests that is happening. So let's dive right in. But let's take a look at our console log. Let's see right there. So that's the payload. That's the response that we get back. And the reason being is because there's one thing that we're missing, okay? And this is where you make the connection. You can see here there's a lot of error, and there isn't actually a request that went out in the network request. So why is this happening? Well, the reason it's happening, we did not specify the URL. This is where you need to tell it, where are you making those requests? And in my case, I'm making the request under API. Where is it? Team add. So I'll add here. I'll do /API/team add. And voila. Now your request is going to go to that route. You go one more time, come here and click submit. You can see we got a response back from the team add. This is what we sent out. We sent out hello world. So if we change something again, like, yo, I got the message. If I come here, got the message, I'm gonna show you. And if I click that one there, you can see now this is the response we got back from this endpoint using the data that we have from here from our Axios request. Okay. And then if we take a look at the network request here, you can see now, hold on, let's make sure that's coming in. So if I take a look at the request, let's take a look at the request just to see. If we take a look at the network request, you can see this little blue right there. That's the request that is happening. So if I come here, you can see now this is the request we made to the team. We sent out this payload. Perhaps this is the first request. This is where we get the successful one. Let's see. Yep, this is where we get the successful request one. And you got the hello world. And if you keep going down, you can extend this one to make sure that you are seeing all the requests that are happening, or extend this one. And now I believe this is the last request, and you can see we're getting something back. So what do you do from here, right? I'll leave this to you guys. I hope that kind of gives you some really good insight. But the first thing you could do here is, we think whenever the user submit the form, you could proceed with adding some validation. Okay, so you'll add some validation in there. So you'll add like some validation, making sure the user email is an actual email, the phone number is an actual phone number, whatever that is. So you could add those, handle that one right there. And then on your API routes, wherever you have that API routes, then here, whenever you get those submission, then you can possibly send them to an email. Like you can use like an email provider. It could be mail, it could be Mailgun, it could be SendGrid, it could be anything, but you can use those to send those out. So if you want us to do it, go ahead and kind of integrate this further, maybe it's gonna send out how to send email with Next.js, please hit the thumbs up and give this video a really big thumbs up, and then we'll come up with part 2 of this in order to send this email to like an email provider. See you guys shortly in another video.